When you need to fuse two parts of your 3D pen project together, sometimes it is as simple as few blobs of plastic and you are done. Other times, things get more complicated, and sometimes they get very complicated. So let's explore our options, shall we? Let's start simple with two flat parts. Starting flat means you can finish the surface beforehand and get any design you want. I like to tape my straight joints to prevent any plastic ooze to the outside of the seam. Stabilize the project with something that will help you make the right angle, and the rest is just simple pen work. The first seam is almost always easy. As you add on, it gets a bit more difficult to reach all the places. You will need to proceed just one part at a time, as far as you can reach in with the pen. And sometimes you may not even reach all the way to the middle. But as long as the project stays together in the intended shape, it's okay. It is meant to be a temporary bond. Because then you can melt the corners from the outside, and those you can easily reach all the way. It will make them stronger, even them out, and make them look all the same. Enjoy having to smooth and sand just the corners and not the whole project. Once you need to join two 3D parts together, things can get more challenging, because now you may also have to join curves. And you may not be able to reach any part of the seam from the inside. You can still add a blob of plastic here and there to keep the parts together, but the bulk of the fusing will have to be done from the outside. Once you clean off the seam, you can also cover it with customized texture, so nobody will ever know there is a seam. If at least one part of the project is starting flat, you can seize the opportunity to finish the flat area without having to manually smooth and sand it. One of the finishing options is ironing, which will make the whole shape spread ever so slightly bigger. This will provide you with an edge to attach the 3D part with a pen, to make it stay put exactly where you want it. And then you can cut it out with a heat tool, either with a needle tip or a hot knife. The process of cutting itself is enough to seal the seam. If you get a tiny gap here and there, just mend it as you go with the same tool you are cutting with. Another option is baking the flat part. Obviously never bake the 3D part or you will get a puddle. This will do a double duty of smoothing the flat part and sealing the seam at the same time, in one quick step. Just watch out, you have only one chance to get this right. It cannot be repositioned. It's an instant seal. Cool it immediately so the heat of the tile doesn't start buckling the sides of the project. It is good to make the base a hair bigger. So if you don't set it down perfectly centered, you can shave off the imperfections once it's cooled. If you don't have a dedicated toaster oven, This can also be done on the stovetop, but you may at least want a dedicated griddle. Trim can also be done with scissors or a heat cutting tool like in the case of the lizard. Whatever tool you happen to have to get there. Almost every project reaches a stage where the access to the seams from the inside becomes difficult or impossible. I need to put the last two sides on this cube. So far all the seams have been easy, but now I can still reach the sides here, but the back side may be difficult to reach. We may need to deploy the clamshell trick. I am going to add the plastic while the seam is open and resting on a flat work surface, and then close it quickly before the filament has a chance to harden. Now hold till it's cold. At this point I will finish the two sides I could still reach with the pen and proceed to the last piece. I can still use the clamshell trick on one of the four sides, so I will, because at least it will lock the last piece firmly in its place. The remaining three sides will just have to be attached entirely from the outside, which always means more cleanup, but let's try to minimize it by also working the plastic while it's hot. I will continue from one of the existing sides for about 3 lines further and then invert the shape onto the hot plastic before it cools. Now we have seams made with 3 different methods, so we need to equalize the looks by sealing them from the outside. And clean as usual. The clamshell trick is helpful in making difficult acute angles, sealed from the inside. Or in locking 2 halves of complex shapes in place for further assembly. As you can see, you can achieve pretty seamless surfaces with this method. The downside is it only works for straight seams of a certain size. Now, what if we need to join more than 2 pieces together at the same time? This comes up mostly when you need to rearrange the design of your veneer, to either add elements to it or to create the same stripe on both sides of the sheet, for example. Fuse with iron. And now both sides are the same. Now we can build with it the usual way. Same process works for checkerboard or any complex marquetry work. See, I told you you can have any design you want. Now, what if the pieces you need to fuse are curved, like tubes and cones? For my dragon project, I started with a bunch of flat parts, so I could customize my color patterns and then shape them into tubes and cones. Now I will have to seal this head part so the tube continues seamlessly all around. The best way to do that is micro-ironing it between two Teflon sheets, like the rest of the tube. You may be thinking, how is this different from just sealing it with a soldering tool? The short answer is, it comes out more finished, as opposed to the direct contact with the soldering tool, which creates sharp burred surface that catches on things and needs sanding. Same story with the tail cone. Here I will iron with a rounded tool because the shape is so skinny, any flat tip will iron a flat trail facet on it. The second part of the head is also a partial cone, and I will have to attach it to the tube I made earlier, like so. Make sure you plan some way to keep things steady while you work. This time I will use the melt tool directly on the plastic, because I need to be able to see what I'm doing and where I'm doing it. This is the plan of how this critter is going to come together. I told you it sometimes gets complicated. A lot of the final assembly is again just simple pen work. Complex assemblies like this one will probably use most of the 10 fusing techniques in one project. And then you may need to attach things together while they still move independently of each other. And for that, you may need to rivet. I will use a piece of straightened filament as it comes off the spool. No pen or printer necessary. If you are a jeweler, this is called a hat pin, or you can think of it as a rivet. This project can become a piece of jewelry or a Christmas ornament, but this technique is especially handy when it comes to anything with wheels, like toy vehicles, trains and such. Attaching eyes to critters is a kind of a special category of fusion, and it works for noses too. This is just one of many ways of making and attaching eyes. But they all have one thing in common. You need the creature to have a good eye contact with both eyes looking in the same direction. Or it will look crazy or just plain odd. So you need to plan the placement well until you are happy with it. Then stabilize the eyes in the chosen position with kneaded eraser or mounting putty so they don't shift while you fuse them. And melt them in, one at a time. every time one 3D pen line crosses another, there will be a tiny bump, which is okay. But if you need to join multiple complicated lines, things can get messier than you would like. And you may need a different strategy, like make a couple of separate line grids. Just stick them lightly in the corners so they stay put, and let the heat do the job. Now you have one layer sheet, completely fused, without any messy crossroads. I have fused up to 5 grids at a time. Of course, different order of colors produces slightly different look, so play with it. You can fuse lines in ways that still produce lace-like textures with holes, or fuse them to a completely solid, pre-finished background for a raised, textured look. Did I mention you can have any surface you want? And once you have it, then you can make it 3D, if the project calls for it. If all else fails, just use glue. I use Loctite Super Glue Ultra Liquid, but there are also glues specifically manufactured for PLA. Sometimes heat fusion techniques are a bit scary if something needs to be super precise or could somehow get damaged with the heat. I just chicken out and glue it. Here I need to attach a flange to the lid of this box. I want it to be precisely centered and don't quite trust myself to not have to reposition it. So I will just glue it, clamp it, and call it a day. By the way, the full videos for all these projects are in the description, should you need more details on any of them. And here is a video full of 3D pen beginner tips, if you are just getting started with 3D pen. So until next time, go and make something!